So one of the cool side benefits of this that I totally should have been paying attention to this back in 2019 when we first started, was we can create Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere. Where we've now updated this to Starlink using satellite, of course, satellite communications, but solar power. We're running 24/7 months on end, just using satellite power. And what's interesting to me is they are spending millions of dollars to run cables for a lot of these rural areas, and satellite's the way to go. And so now one of these systems can actually, for a rancher, is like making a smart ranch. You can control gates, cameras, agriculture, livestock. It was one thing I should have been thinking about, but I was so focused on horses, which I was told to do, but it's a good thing to do.
We're live,
right. Okay. Well, everyone, we love to get started on time. So good morning and welcome to 1 Million Cups. And for those of you who've never been here before, 1 Million Cups is a national organization, and it happens across the nation. Of course, New Mexico is the best. Now, if you want to check in, you can scan that code, check in. If you're there in person, you can get a pen after 3 times and a really cool notebook after 6. At least I think we still have goodies left somewhere.
We have lots of goodies.
Okay, so make sure to check in. Yeah, scan that code, check in, get your let one of the organizers know, and they'll get you your goodies. So, all right, so 1 Million Cups, national organization supported by Kauffman Foundation. And our mission is to lower the barriers of access to education to all entrepreneurs. And throughout the US, obviously, we focus on Albuquerque. And what's the next slide? Sorry, guys, I do not know these by heart. All right, our local mission, we try to make this as educational and as helpful as possible. We don't want to let just anyone present where they're not here to sell you their product. And right, we want them to share their journey and to be open about, you know, the things that they've had to come across as an entrepreneur. And you as an audience have the opportunity to help them with their challenges, make them think about their business in maybe a different light. And so we want to make this as interesting as possible for everyone. And next, please. And as you can see, we are the only one in Albuquerque. And, you know, I know they've tried to start them up in Santa Fe. Albuquerque, we have never canceled 1 Million Cups, even during the pandemic. And so we want to make sure that we are as consistent for our entrepreneurial community as possible. All right, next one. And our key pillars, like I said, no one's trying to sell you anything. They're presenting their journey and their challenges. And we want you guys to make authentic connections. I know it's hard to make an authentic connection here online, but if you're there in person, definitely talk to the person next to you, find out what they're up to. Maybe they can help you with something. And it's run for the community, by the community. And we want to continually be radically and intentionally inclusive with all types of entrepreneurs and all types of businesses. And our mission, basically, this is telling you that you don't have to do this alone. We are here to support you. If you have questions, if you're looking for a resource, talk to somebody, especially talk to the organizers. We are connected in many ways across Albuquerque, across Santa Fe, and we know a lot of resources. So definitely ask us if you need something. And if you have a business and you sold to someone besides just your mother, then make sure to apply. There's the bit.ly link down there at the bottom of the screen. Just type that in and apply. One of us will get back to you. And if we approve you, then you can pick your schedule and put yourself on a Wednesday morning. We have a coach work with you to make sure your presentation is not a sales pitch, right? And I think that's it. Oh, next. And these are our awesome organizing team. So we got Paul, who's there in person. We've got Lisa, who is our lead organizer. We've got Eric, who's probably running amok somewhere. I saw him the other day in Santa Fe. We have Danielle, yay, new people, who's there in person, I believe. And then myself, Sonia Doing. And then Kakoa and Oscar, I'm sure are there or are somewhere also working hard.
Behind the scenes, they're doing all the video editing. Which
Oh, awesome. Thank you guys for that.
Keiko had a
Definitely.
baby. Wow. Oh, Keiko had a baby last week. I mean,
Oh, yay. All right, awesome. And then here's our awesome sponsors. So we have Fat Pipe ABQ, owned by Stu Rose, who's online right now. Hi, Stu. Thanks for being here. And thank you so much for letting us have 1 million cups at your location because yeah, great location. If anyone's looking for a place to rent to get out of their house and their little tiny corner of an office, go rent a space at Fat Pipe and get away from the dishes and the TV. Foundation for Sustainable Living, they pay for our coffee sponsor. So thank you so much. We all need that in the morning. We have Dry Heat Photography. Are they in the house this morning?
yes.
Yay. I'm sorry I haven't been there to meet you in person, but thank you so much for taking photos. And then we have More Than Organized. Miriam brings the creamer for the coffee. And we have Noventum Custom Software. Brian and his team bring the donuts and sometimes baked goods because Brian is an awesome baker. And we have Minuteman Press. So Carrie has printed some really nice replacement items to, oh my gosh. Lisa, tell them what you printed.
She printed our time to check in sheets. She printed some business cards. I've sent her some business. She actually is helping our presenter from last week.
Awesome.
With her card deck. So she's great.
Yeah. If you need anything printed, check out Minuteman Press with Carrie. And thank you all our sponsors. And as I said before, this organization is run by the community for the community, as you can see. And so if you post anything on social media, make sure to tag us with at 1 Million Cups ABQ or hashtag 1MC ABQ. And I believe Paul is up next.
Thanks, Sonia.
You're welcome.
It's a real pleasure to introduce Rock Hart of Wildlife Protection Management. I think Rock is a real demonstration of what you can do with a company if you get up early, work hard, and take good care of the animals. Come on up, Rock.
All right, well, thank you, Paul and 1 Million Cups for allowing me to do this presentation. A little background on myself. I guess I've been kind of an entrepreneur, but for the most part, my background was a police officer with the Albuquerque Police Department. Found myself managing a 22,000 acre ranch by myself, really rough terrain. And I think I was actually hired to take care of the feral humans more than anything else. And so after that was under control, not that I hurt anybody, but after that was under control, I found myself with a growing population of wild horses. And so in trying to deal with that, started the journey. A little background on it is there's a major overpopulation of wild horses. When I'm talking to investors, that is like, why are you even doing it? But most of the public doesn't know what happens, particularly on state, tribal land, or private land. That photo happens to be on our ranch a couple springs ago, probably was eating loco weed because it was the only food available at the time and has a poisonous effect. We're way over the allowed maximum level, which is both safe for themselves and other species that share that land. The two major, in fact, only ways of dealing with the wild horse population right now is the roundups and the single shot dart rifles. The roundup contractors are what mostly the BLM federal government uses. Very inhumane, they very expensive, litigious, and they, to give you an idea on the expense, we are all paying for the horses that they've rounded up, and that's approximately 80,000 horses right now, costing the American taxpayers $80 million a year. This is just not sustainable, and plus it's just not humane. The horse advocates on the other side are using single shot dart rifles. And that's cool if you can get within 20 yards. There's a couple filmmakers in this crowd that have seen my horses. you can't get within 50 yards of my horses. They're very wild. So that wasn't going to be an option. It's also, there's no validity. You don't know which horse you've hit, how many vaccines it's had, boosters. Sometimes it's hard to tell gender. So that isn't a good solution either. I approached NMSU with the idea to use remote technology. It was accepted into 2 different programs that uses the NSF I-Core training model. That makes you interview as many people from the top to the bottom to find out what you make for them, not what you think they need. In this particular case, we interviewed federal, state, tribal, private ranchers, and animal advocates. And while none of them could agree on any one single solution, they all wanted something that was humane, comprehensive, cost-effective, a unique ID, solar off-grid, and of course, satellite communications. From those interviews, we built a system that hits all of that. There's so much in the system that if you can ask questions later, it would be impossible. I can get into an hour on each individual section of the system, but we built it and we got a patent for it in 2019. That I know of, we're the only ones in the world to pull this off, in particular, even implanting an RFID chip and reading it again. So considering the microchips, we, as part of the problem, I don't think I'm part of the problem, but part of dealing with the problem. As a rancher, I built in a lot of bells and whistles into this thing, something I would want to see. Recently, we had been contacted by the federal government saying, well, you know, when you have the data, that'd be really cool. And I think I have the data. So we did a little bit of data compilation, and out of the 65 horses that we hit with microchips, we had 126,000 reads. When I told the government, the USDA and the Forest Service, it blew them away. They were like, wait, what? And these people are like data junkies. They can't have enough data. From this data, we can even tell you what horse is running the hottest temperature, when that horse is running the hottest temperature, whether it's running a fever. We think we're even witnessing estrus, which is really cool stuff. We know more about a horse in the middle of nowhere than most people know in their own backyard. So, to the business model, because no one's done this before, we're kind of feeling our way in the dark to figure out how the customer wants it. It looks like it's going to be a service or subscription model. There are some tribal agencies that don't want that because having non-tribal members on their land is not something they like. So to get around that, we introduced the idea of hiring their tribal members to service the systems. And that seems to be doing pretty good. And we're in discussions with a lot of tribes. I'm not going to mention which one, but a lot of discussions. So once we knew we could do it with horses, we realized pretty much every species is a possibility now. There are over 5 million feral pigs in the United States, 24 feral swine in Australia. In fact, just this morning I read the government is creating a czar for feral swine in Australia. It's just way out of control. You've got swine now all the way up in Canada, they're calling super pigs because they are being able to withstand these really cold temperatures. So it's a big, big problem. Deer in urban areas with zoonotic disease does apply. Found out that the majority of the deer got COVID. Who knew? But they haven't. So the possibility of getting diseases from horses or horses, deer, other animals can happen. In Australia, they have over 25 million kangaroos and over 1 million camels in the backcountry that they can't get to, where our system could address. So our direct competitors, there isn't anybody. We can't find anybody who has this kind of technology, but we have some indirect competitors. The surprise one that I thought I never would see was the advocacy groups. Because, and I think it's just kind of a defensiveness, we're more humane than the humane groups. Their shot is usually 10 to 50 yards out, where ours is 7 inches out. In fact, we've had to modify the darts to go off at such a low velocity that, you know, the horses, they're usually back within 10 seconds feeding again, where their horses, man, they're darting off and then they got to try to find that dart and there's no validity. So I didn't see that one coming. I thought they would be all behind it, but they aren't for whatever reason. So one of the cool side benefits of this that I totally should have been paying attention to this back in 2019 when we first started was we can create Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere. We've now updated this to Starlink using satellite, of course, satellite communications, but solar power. We're running 24/7 months on end, just using satellite power. And what's interesting to me is they are spending millions of dollars to run cables for a lot of these rural areas, and satellite's the way to go. And so now one of these systems can actually, for a rancher, is like making it a smart ranch. You can control gates, cameras, agriculture, livestock. It was one thing I should have been thinking about, but I was so focused on horses, which I was told to do, but it's a good thing to do. My team, Jim Polito is my lead engineer. Frank Drouet is my IT and software guru. Chris Balzano is our government relations. Linda Stewart is our director of projects and grants. Scott McNeil is my chief operating officer. And that's it. Did I do it under 6? I did probably.
Thank you very much. So form a line to ask questions, and the etiquette is to introduce yourself, give your name and what organization you're with, unless you're a Ronin, and then ask your question. And we'll also take online questions.
Hey, Brian Steiner with Noventum Custom Software. So I know for feral pigs and coyotes, hunting is just completely insufficient for population control. For horses, is it just politically not feasible to, I mean, I know the Navajo Nation tried to have a wild horse hunt, and then it got canceled because of all the problems they had. Is that just not one of the many solutions that is even considered?
Yes. So they've tried to get the American public to make horses kosher for human consumption. But the political pressure against that is so beyond it'll never happen. The taxpayers just won't put up for it. Even in Mexico, where wild horses or feral horses are eaten, that's been reduced to street vendors at this point. So even in Mexico, they're starting to pull away from it. I think part of the problem is humans, dolphins, humans, horses. There's this mutual affection. And so it's, in fact, even Australia, where eating kangaroos are kosher, a lot of the people look at the kangaroos as their national animal. And so it's one of these things where even that is getting backlash. So when you don't have a consumer or you don't have a natural predator like we do with the wild horses, I don't see it happening.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good morning, Rock.
Yes.
John Patrick. I have a small business, Amazing Life, and Enchanted Lands music, art, and wellness stuff. But I also have a tech side of me, and I'm so fascinated with what you're doing. So I spent a little bit of time in Placitas house sitting and Mustang Ridge or Mustang Mountain. And you could see all the wild Mustangs running around. And some of them were kind of, like you said, they're very feral. A couple of them you can kind of get up to and maybe get like 10 or 20 feet. And so it's just fascinating to be in New Mexico and seeing all this wildlife. How are you addressing these horses in kind of semi-urban rural places? Like you're talking about being out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, but in places like Placitas where the horses are, is that also a program that you're working with?
So I recently did a story in the Sandoval County Signpost, and it's very controversial over there. People either love them, hate them, but typically they're on one side of the fence or the other. I'm really in between. There's something needs to be done, but I love them. They're beautiful animals. It comes down to the politics. The politics rule the day at the end of the day. So like, for instance, the reason I stuck with the horses on the ranch, that's my problem. And really a single shot dart rifle in Placitas is doable. I mean, you could do that, but even that came across with a bunch of controversy. And so therefore you're dealing with, Placitas is a microcosm of the entire United States right now. Let's put it that way. Even within the Navajo Nation, we were talking about how they made it edible for that, but even within the Navajo Nation, you didn't hear this in the press, but there was a backlash even within the Navajo Nation on, do we eat them? Do we love them? And so there's going to be that issue right now. The political and the PR by the advocate groups is way much better than the government will ever do. they're going to win the day. When you look at those big brown eyes, you can't help but love them. You look at the foals. I love the foals, and I'm thinking, it's another 100+ acres I have to supply food for. So it's very difficult.
Thank you for that answer. Another question I have is kind of your remote system that delivers the chip. I assume there's the RFID chip. Can you explain that a little bit? Is it like a robotic system and it's battery powered and it also hooks up to the satellites?
So the entire system is all satellite and solar driven. And the microchips are the exact, they are the exact same microchip you put in a cat and a dog. The problem with those microchips is no one's been able to place them in a body part where you could continuously read it. We simply looked at the horses and going, what part of the horse can we always read that microchip? Turns out that the triceps muscle was always in position. So when we know that that horse is in position, I have more cameras out there than probably Albuquerque has watching all the bad guys out here. And so I knew exactly when a horse was in position. I could send an RFID chip. And what I thought that was going to be the hardest thing to pull off turned out to be the easiest thing to pull off. We can precisely implant a microchip at any depth we want. The cool thing is, since we started in 2019, nothing's migrated out of place. They're all still working. We kind of blew away the entire industry at that point. The system reads that chip every time the horse goes back and forth between that system. As long as we keep the systems standard, that we'll continue to read that chip. We had one horse I microchipped in 2019. Lost it for a couple years, and all of a sudden, just last month, I'm looking at this microchip and I'm going, wait, who's this? And so I look it up. It was a horse I hit when he was just barely old enough to have a chip, and here he was as a alpha stallion now, beautiful looking horse, totally looking different, but the same identification. So there was a great efficacy on being able to know that you've got the right horse and a unique ID. It's pretty cool stuff.
And my last question is, how is this data helping you with the population control, if that's part of the program?
So what we're able to do is, with every mare that we hit, we're creating a file. We know when it's got its initial shot, when it got its booster, when it's going to need its booster in 2 years. And so in that regard, I was hoping my IT guy was going to make it here this morning, but we're at the point now where the next system, in fact, we can implant it in our system right now. If a microchip comes up and that horse needs a vaccine, it'll send it automatically. I won't have to be sitting there watching Breaking Bad at home, waiting for the horse to come up. Now the system can go totally fully auto or not do anything. So there's a lot of cool stuff here that makes this comprehensive and cost effective. Really, that's what it comes down to. None of the systems out there right now are either they're not humane or they're so comprehensive. We're taking in animals that we can't even afford to feed. So there's a lot of cool technology just blowing up. And of course, you got to be there to take it in and put it into your system.
The next question we're going to take online, Marilyn Sue Prolazny.
Hi, good morning, Rock. I love what you're doing. I actually have 2 quick questions for you. One, is there any possibility that the wild foals can be domesticated if you get them young enough? And 2, how can we help you?
Yes, and you can buy my horses. So the one thing I did, it's a known study that people don't want the alpha stallions or the old mares. Nobody wants a horse that you're going to be spending vet bills on in the next 5 years and putting the horse down and then having to dispose of it. Everybody wants the younger horses. I did an online experiment with my Facebook page, and I'm showing these beautiful horses, and I said, anybody want some? I had more takers than I had horses. So working with the past New Mexico State vet who gave me the idea, there's a tranquilizer out there that we could actually hit that one animal with. It doesn't put them down, but it kind of makes them a little loopy, where 2 guys can take that horse and capture it. That's what I would like to introduce to the BLM, as opposed to doing the roundups and then hanging on horses that we feed until they die. Why don't we take the ones that are the most adoptable? How can you help me? talk about our system. Tell them that this is the most humane system in the world. It's the most common sense system in the world. And tell our state senators, often politics are running the day, but common sense is not being followed. That
Maybe
makes
you
sense?
could line yourself up with horse breeder organizations who would have an understanding of what you're doing and, really engage on this.
And I agree. I think there's another part to this too. On the ranch I manage, it's pretty secluded. And I think I probably have some Spanish blood out there. That also increases the value of the animal. All of these animals out here are going to be crossbred. I've had animals that have been dumped. I know that for a fact. But you're probably not going to find a full bred Spanish blood. But if you have some of that, that brings a little extra value. And I think that's important. These animals do have value. They're beautiful, but people want the younger ones that they can work with. They don't want the stallion that is basically a Hell's Angel at this point. It's going to beat up all the other domestic horses in the corral.
Marilyn Pruitt, Our Peaceful Path. I see you saying you get the chip in the horse, and is that from a distance, or you have to get them up close once? How do you do that? And how do you get the shots and other things into that?
Good question. That's where, if I could have done a video, that'd have been really cool. You could have seen it. When the horses are in position, we place the boxes, both the RFID box and the vaccine box, within 7 inches of where they are. So when they're in position, my shot is 7 inches. I probably have the most precise shot on the face of Earth remotely. To give you an idea, I've actually microchipped and vaccinated a horse all the way from Hawaii with my smartphone. And so the cool thing about that is that, and of course, the 126,000 reads is showing me over since 2019 that this is sustainable. We can continue to do this time and time again. The experts really doubted whether we'd be able to do something like this. To augment this, we applied for an NSF grant, phase 1 that we won, and it was to create facial recognition technology for wild horses. In phase 1, we proved we could do it. Just last night, which stressed me out a little bit, we got through the panel review. And of course, in typical NSF form, hopefully they're not listening. In typical, there's about 1,000,001 questions, and they want it like tomorrow, even though I've been waiting 5 months since we gave our phase 2. But the cool thing is that being able to do it now with facial recognition technology, I think augmented with some RFID, because you can actually see if diseases are emerging in animals. I don't think we throw that away. But that facial recognition technology pretty much takes any excuse away from the federal government not to use this.
And then you take these horses, or you could use any animal, and they never have to get close to a human to get these shots and everything else. And you can track them until they die. That's cool.
Yeah, my favorite band is a band I can't get within 100 yards of. She's got she's in most of my videos, and I call her Bullseye because on her back she has these markings with this bullseye right in the middle of it. I've seen her with 2 foals, but since we hit her back in 2019, she hasn't been re-impregnated. The cool thing is that the vaccine we're using, it's a GnRH based vaccine. It basically takes you out of the mood. That's probably the best way to put it. And it'll work in males too. Probably a lot of women wished that more males had this, but it didn't affect the band dynamics. The same band is together. The alpha is still protecting the female. Nothing has changed within those dynamics. And I suspect, based upon that she's approximately 10 to 12 years old, she's had enough foals. It's enough. And there comes a point where when you have foal year after year, where their gestation period is about a month or about a year, and within 2 weeks of giving birth, they're back into estrus. So their entire lives are pregnancy, foals. Sometimes on that one, can I put up a?
Yeah.
There, I have one illustration of a horse that we hit with a vaccine and one that we didn't. And I didn't get into that. This gives me the perfect opportunity to show why this is the most humane. And yeah, no humans need to be around. That's, I think, the coolest thing. They are wild and they should kind of remain that way. We don't want to make them pets. While Lisa's looking for this to get me back online here, in the same day back this last year, one of my mares that I had hit during this, I think it was in 2021, I take that back. It was a major drought. And the mare that I had hit with the vaccine looked good. And we had no grass. I'm thinking, what the heck is she eating? We had another mare come up that hadn't been vaccinated. And let's go. There it is. The one on top is the one that I had hit with the vaccine. You can see her body composition is insanely better than the one on the bottom. That's likely due to the fact that the one on the bottom is eating for 3. She's pregnant, she's feeding herself, and she's still feeding last year's foal. In this sad story here, what ended up happening was I saw no foal around. That was one year I saw more foals abandoned than any other year. So these mares are just, they can hardly eat for themselves, much less take care of their young. So there does come a point when year after year, it's just not humane to let them stay pregnant. I think you continue to let the DNA into the herd to make sure it's good, but there does come a point where you're being more humane by doing something rather than nothing.
Hey, Rock. Trevor Clancy, you have a core visual. You mentioned the political climate as being a big obstacle for you, and also mentioned that having a customer or a client is kind of what you need to really take off. So I was wondering how easy it is to adapt this to like the feral hog problem. It seems like that would be a good place to go to avoid, you know, the political controversies and all that. And if you actually retrofitted any of that and approached any private, you know, ranches or other people that want to get rid of these hogs.
Yeah, good question. Not because I just like you. The feral pigs are majorly out of control. In one of the stories, I had said that due to the politics, half-heartedly but half truthfully, wish that I had started with feral pigs than the horses. And the horses are holy, they're sacred. You know, you have candles on each side of that little altar. But when it comes to the feral pigs, we'll shoot them with a helicopter. Who gives a damn? They are so smart. They've learned to run underneath power lines and not get shot from helicopters. So this is an animal that we're going to be dealing with for a really long time. I approached the USDA on this, and it was interesting because the response I got was, well, yeah, there's a lot of pigs, but we have it under control. I honestly didn't know what to say. I think what happened was, and I'm kind of seeing this, even though I'll introduce our system to them and I'll say this is the potentials. It comes down to sometimes when you're talking to a federal agency or a private rancher, they're a little offended that you're saying, well, I have something that can help you. And so that's part of the problem sometimes is overcoming egos. And the politics are a big deal. With the feral pigs, no one seems to care. Now, to your point, in Hawaii, I did talk to the University of Hawaii, and in Hawaii, versus eradication versus management, they want management and Oklahoma, they want something that they can manage the pigs, but still traditionally hunt the pigs. But where they just want to shoot them, kill them, and even that's not working. The science and the studies have been done showing that both eradication and birth control are the single most effective way to stop it. And that's really what we should be doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Sonia, you have something to share?
Yes, I do. First of all, I'm Sonia Doing, CEO of Women's Thriller Writers Association, but my background is also in technical writing. So, you know, I often take kind of a project from a business, and I take the information and I make it more user friendly and for customers. And I just want to point out that there are some words you're using that mean something different to those of us in the audience. So you keep saying the word hit, and to me that means, you know, hit, but I know that's not what you mean. So I'd just like to suggest, if you are presenting this or talking to people, to come up with something more specific, like when we vaccinated or when we put in the RFID, you know, being more specific so that we can picture it versus hit.
And that's really good constructive criticism. In fact, I often have to know my audience to use the word feral or wild. If you call them feral, well, that's just an F word. But then they want the word wild. But with some other people, you can't use the word wild. So you're exactly correct. And I hadn't even thought of that. We are actually using darts. We were told by the HSUS and all of it through that NSF I-Corps training thing, don't get away from the methods that are being used right now. Stay with those, because if you get out of that, it's going to take you years to get in. So to your point, I say hit, I envision a dart moving 7 inches to its target. And so in that, I should probably just say we delivered a RFID chip or a vaccine. That's probably the best way to do it. Thank you.
Right, especially because your system is so much more less drastic, right? Less scary for the horse, right? So a less drastic word would definitely, I think, be great.
Good point. I will do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Miriam Ortiz-Pino with More Than Organized. A couple questions brought up a couple thoughts, and then more thoughts, but mostly I'm curious about, I was wondering if you had gone to the ranching associations to start, and then the next question I realized, how do you keep other species from getting in the way or eating all the food?
Great question. And yes, I have approached first of all, the livestock board. I have approached the Cattle Growers Association. I threw my hat in the ring for the cattle that were in the Gila. The system would have been perfect for that, but we were totally ignored. I think because we have a foot on either side, and that side wants to be it, or that side wants to be it. And so it's very difficult. Having said that, we recently submitted a proposal to, I'll just say, a very, very large ranch. Let's say it's over 500,000 acres, and there's just no way that they can get close to these animals. So we are getting some traction, but that's part of it. You know, in a lot of these ranching worlds, their easiest solution is a bullet. But I'll tell you, the ranchers in particular don't even like doing that.
Right.
And so in that regard, they pretty much won't do it, but they don't want to admit they also have a problem. It's getting so bad right now, especially with the lands that are contiguous with tribal and state land. There's nothing to eat, and I think we're starting to get attention with that.
Yeah.
Your second question?
How do you keep the other livestock from eating the hay?
So that drove me crazy. In the very beginning of our data, I had hundreds of, I had so many reads on our RFID simply because when the horses came up, I couldn't stop them from eating. And so by the time I get home, all the bait was gone. It was just driving me crazy. We got a lot of data, but all the bait was gone. So, and then we had some feral cows. We had some leased cows out there at one point. We even had a paintball gun on a turret that felt very satisfying with the cows. Although that we just felt that wasn't going to go over well. And then we did what I should have done in the very beginning, and it's a bait cover. Basically, it's just a remote bait cover system that they use in rich homes in Florida to protect the skylights from hurricanes.
Oh, yeah.
And so we just employed one of those, and it's a nice little 12-volt bolt cover thing, and it's solid, and that works.
So you release it when you see a horse?
Exactly. In fact, the cool thing is we have some bands that are more aggressive than other bands. So what'll happen is that band will want to basically eat up all of the bait. So with the cool new system is I can just close that up, and or with the new software, if that band comes up, it reads a microchip, it'll just close the door. It does scare the animals away, but they always come back once they get a taste of alfalfa. That's the big thing. We've tried other baits. Alfalfa seems to be the way to go. But once they get a taste, they always come back.
And then my other question has to do with what Sonia was saying, like figure out the audience and talk to that. And Barb might have some insight into communicating more easily with the target markets, because I know you have several different ones, like the Gila situation. And I just love what you're doing. I know when I grew up here, and as a kid, I was always like, I want to see the wild horses. I want to see the wild horses. And I never saw them. And I moved back and I'm like, there's the wild horses. They're everywhere.
It's so true. About my only excuse for my improper word usage is I'm a guy. We just aren't as articulate. That's a stupid excuse. I recognize, but I think I've already used up my quota of words for the day. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to be like,
Grammarly.
I do use that, by the way.
We have a question online from Phil.
Hi, Phil Wilton from Executive Outcomes. I think you have a great product. You also said you don't have direct competition, but you have indirect competition, which I thought was a great analogy as well. You've gone a long way, gone through the ICOR program, and I know that because I'm a National Science Foundation mentor myself. And you seem to have a lot of opposition or problems trying to get launched. So I'm wondering what in your mind is the most valuable asset that you've got with your product, and what is the lowest common denominator problem issue that you could enter that market through? Does that make sense? Because you seem to have a lot of issues with a lot of different either tribes or government or people, or so I'm trying to figure out, do you have the right value proposition that you're selling, and what's the lowest common denominator wall that you can break through?
Great question. The common denominator is humane. The good thing about the human race, even some of the bad people I meet, want to be humane. And I think that's what we sell. This is the single most humane system in the world. And I know that seems very bold. I just don't see any other system being as humane. The other value proposition as far as getting through to them, I was doing I love ChatGPT. I'm having so much fun with it. And so I started to work out what is the value of vaccinating a horse over a 20-year lifespan, which is the average lifespan of these feral wild horses. And come to find out, if you were to do this every other year, which by the way, they try to do it every year, so double this cost. One horse, if you were to maintain that horse out in the wild, is going to cost between $20,000 and $30,000 over its entire lifespan. This is a wild animal in the middle of nowhere. Double that if that is going to be every year, which what they're trying to do right now. If you take the allowed maximum level, which there are approximately 56,000 horses over their allowed maximum level, you take half of those as assuming they're mares, and you do the math on that, you're at $1.8 billion over a 20-year time period trying to sustain something for 25,000 horses. I think the value proposition is the insane part of it. I did a little bit more math, and of course, with a business, you want to try to get the maximum profit, but you also want to make it a win for whoever you're doing this for. The BLM is an easy one because it's costing them $1,000 to $3,000 per horse to vaccinate one horse, and then they microchip it in the neck, which is impossible to read again, and they hope they can find it again next year. Whereas our system, it's always out there, they're always back, it's very easy. And I think you're saving them huge amounts of money. So getting through to them and trying to communicate the cost savings, which I've done, but it kind of, I think in particular, the Bureau of Land Management would like to see a pilot project with another federal agency or a tribal agency before they adopt it. The good news is that I do have a state agency interested. In fact, I think it was presented to them yesterday by the USDA, and I also have the US Forest Service. Hopefully, I'm going to start doing something with us in the Carson next year. So we're really close to getting started and showing its viability.
Okay, can you put your contact into the chat and
I
maybe
did, Phil. I already
I'll-
put it there. Scroll up.
and I'll contact you after.
Phil, did you hear me? It's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm having a look back.
Yeah, just look back or reach out to me if you can't find it.
Hi, I'm Paul Sutter with Equisec. We could talk about horses for hours, and we have, but my question is not really a horse question. I'm very intrigued that nobody's asked about this so far. You found yourself in the strange position of being an inadvertent internet service provider. Have you thought about partnering with someone who can install all the cameras and gates and all the Internet of Things that a ranch might need, but they don't have a connection? So that would be an add-on to putting your system. If somebody buys your system, you say you'll get Internet of Things on your ranch.
Did you want to do it?
No.
So I got to tell you, that idea just came up last month. We were talking amongst the team saying, oh man, the federal government is so slow. And of course, you know, I have so little patience. I pray for patience now kind of thing, right? But in this particular case, we're like, well, do we have something we could sell? That idea just came up last month. So you can see that slide was just a circle, a bunch of little lines on it. That's why. You're exactly right. We do have a champion in Colorado who happens to know a vendor that is dealing with water controls for large ranches. Their biggest problem is communications. Well, there we are. And so they're very interested in what we have. But to your point, finding and I think getting with a security company that does game trail cameras or does that kind of stuff. Basically, and it kind of hit me last night as I was going over the presentation. We have smart homes. We ask Alexa to do anything. You can ask Alexa to close the gate 3,000 miles away and it'll do it. So we are at the point now where we can control things in the middle of nowhere and of course, deal with the horses, you know, protect them. And I think that's the key, but you're right. I haven't even thought of that yet. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Coco, the founder of Cincy Boo. And so I wanted to ask you, and with your slide about your indirect competitors, you mentioned that you were surprised by the response you've received from advocacy groups. And this is something that I'm really interested in as someone who also has a social enterprise, and my product works with parents and children, which I can imagine, you know, is another very sensitive subject, rife with like ego and controversy sometimes. I also have a background in marketing, and so I have some ideas around kind of your issue. But before getting into that, I wanted to also ask you, you also said that you're never going to win the PR battle with advocacy groups. And so my first question for you would be, is that a battle that you even want to fight, so to speak?
Good question. I think, no, we don't want to battle that. We are in a category all of ourselves. And I think we have enough things that are going good with this system that we don't need to compete. Single shot dart rifles don't compete with a system that's comprehensive, cost effective, and has validity. And so therefore, there isn't a competition. I have found that most of the criticism is behind the scenes. I'll hear about it, but I'll never hear who said it. And it's kind of a shame because you're talking to some major organizations within the US that said, you're doing the right thing, but then they say things on the backside. It's kind of disheartening a little bit. But no, you know, they've got budgets for marketing. When I'm not doing things like this, I'm fixing on the south fence line, literally on the south fence line of the ranch, which I love doing, by the way. It's all by myself. I think I found dinosaur poop the other day, which is really cool. But But so having, I think at some point I have to have a full-time marketing business director, PR person. Managing a 20,000 acre ranch and still servicing the system. And I'm knee deep into the technology. I'm a geek. I've turned into a geek. I love it. And so that's where my true talents lie. I think I really need to find a young person who's just going to punch us through to the other side.
That sounds good. I love what you're doing, and it makes me even like, want to help any way I can. So if there's ever an opportunity, I'd be happy to help you come up with something. I know that, like you mentioned, that you're using ChatGPT. I don't know if you're aware, but another thing that you can do with AI now is make, for example, short animated films. And so I'm imagining, what if you could make a short film about what it's like to be a horse under these circumstances where you aren't healthy, where you don't have what you need, you're going through life like that.
Oh, I love that. So good.
So anyway, I'd be happy to talk to you more about how you can do that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the last thing I need is more ideas, but that's the first thing I actually need. And so
Well, I
but
can
yeah,
help you do it. So
thank you. Thank you.
That's so cool.
To your point, I'll say this real quick. I was talking to a literal rocket scientist from NASA who, when I was talking to this group, I didn't know who he was. I've been told there was this guy and they call it the Rocket Man. And with everything I'm saying, punching in, I was like, who's this guy? And he continued asking questions. And he was researching everything I said. Talk about a little intimidating. Apparently I did okay. So he came up and he says, you need a young person to punch you through to this other side. And he's totally right. I think we need somebody who can do that, because I'm so, with any startup, and you all know, it's overwhelming. You are everything from CEO to janitor. You're doing everything, and it can be overwhelming. So having that help would be great. And also there's that budget. You just don't have a budget yet. So paying somebody is always really hard. I've had a lot of people that sure they want to work for you, but you've got no money to pay them. But if there's potential, that I'm trying to get people to come on that sees the potential in the long run.
Hello, my name is Eleni. I'm a registered nurse and founder of Hope Transitions. I am thrilled with your presentation and what you're doing, developing these modalities to help the horses and the vaccination process. How it just surprised me how you were able to do that by the click of a button in your phone and you were not present. That just decreases the risk when you're injecting the horses if the person is doing it, then using technology for that. So it's amazing. I would like to know, my question is, where do you see yourself? What do you hope to accomplish within the next 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I thought this 3 to 5 years ago. But I would like to see our system deployed all over the United States. At our own costs, we can build enough systems, I think, to service the entire United States for under $2 million. And so what, and I think that comes from me being really cheap. We employed a lot of, we learned during COVID, there was a supply and demand thing that was going on. We started to use systems that were no longer available. And so we just went back to, okay, what's on the market? What is working? So we just went back to it. I had one investor group said, well, can you make it look a little more professional? And I was kind of like, yeah, but if I do, it's going to increase the cost so much. Not only that, I'm not going to be able to find these pieces again in 5 years because they're not going to make them. So there does come a point of taking what there's a big supply of. I'm not sure I'm answering your questions. 3 to 5 years. Yes, I think we can do the entire United States. I would like to be working in Utah, Nevada, Arizona, California, Colorado, Montana. We would have to be making some alterations to our solar capabilities, even though that's getting better and better. The technology by the year is increasing to the point where I think we could service all of these, including Canada. In fact, I did talk to some people in Canada. But we would probably have to employ some portable generators to keep that power going. But that's all very doable from 3,000 miles away. Someone just needs to fill it up just like they do the bait.
Wow. I can see your company or what you're doing, not just national, but international, global. It's huge what you're doing, so don't stop. Keep knocking doors and it will open up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
David Murphy, Core Visual. I'm just curious when human trials can begin. Because I hate getting shots, but if I had a feeding trough that I could go to, I would stand there and, no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I am curious though about I've had the privilege to be out there and see the dart. It's like a pneumatic thing. Curious about reloading those. Is there a magazine with more than one? Is it just a one and done? How does that work with setting that up?
So part of the limitations when we first started was we have to keep all the temperatures or all the vaccines temperature control between 34 and 42 degrees. That was a major hurdle to overcome. And the more we worked on it, the cheaper it got and the more efficient. Go figure, less was more. And so that's pretty cool. We started with just 2 barrels in each system. We already knew that 2 barrels was a form of a that lady's going to yell at me for saying semi-automatic weapon, but basically you can do more than 1 dart at that point. We just increased it to 4 and it got more efficient. So can we build something with more? Yes. One of the cool things we're working on is that when we found that we can implant routinely and with very little impact on the animal, the RFID chip, we wish that we had a vaccine that was a solid. I didn't even get into this. The NSF in phase 1 allowed me to use some of that money to that end. I found a guy that used to work for the USDA who says, I've done it. Well, why are you doing it? They didn't want to fund it. So I hired him and we actually did it. It's sitting in my refrigerator right now. So if you want some, I suppose, but the cool thing is working with Iowa State University to put it in a capsule. The cool thing about this vaccine and this capsule that you can implant as a solid, it can be a time release. So depending on the animal you're dealing with, let's say you have a mare that you want her to recontribute back to the DNA pool, you can give her 1 shot as a single depot, it's done. But let's say you have a mare that, you know what, it's time. She's done enough. We would be able to implant a vaccine and shut her down for life. So you're kind of playing Adam and Eve, so to speak, but the potential is there to do it smartly and much more comprehensively and cost effective. I keep saying it, but it's a big deal. Cool, thanks.
Hi, Roger.
Hi.
This will be the last question.
I really appreciate your presentation. It was short and sweet to the point, and my wife and my daughters love horses, been involved with horses for a long time. Not anymore, but as I was listening to you talk, you have a unique and controversial product or idea. And I know you're at the signpost in Sandoval County, but when I was a young man, I was at the University of New Mexico. I had a very unique situation. It was very controversial, but I was able to get a hold of the media, TV station. And I created such a buzz about it that they came out and they wanted me to talk about it. So I know you talked about having a PR management system, marketing system, but if you can somehow get the media involved, even the national media involved with this, I think it will just blow this whole thing up. But people just don't know about it, is what I'm getting. And the more people you get to know about it, even if it is controversial, it's going to create a buzz. You've got something unique and controversial. You need to get out there. So it's just my small suggestion, but I don't know if you've already thought about that.
That's not a small suggestion. That's it. When we first started, in particular, when we were associated with NMSU, that gave us some credibility. We got some immediate state and a little bit of national press. But way back then, we weren't a complete unit yet. And so things kind of died off a little bit. We have been contacting the press. We've been contacting with there was a big story that just recently came out in NBC, and they did a really good full report. And I reached out to, but getting through to these people, I mean, it's like getting through to the president. I mean, how do you do that? And so it's very difficult. We hopefully maybe even today or tomorrow, a writer had volunteered their time to put something on EIN. So I'm hoping that'll come out and get us some national press.
Keep it up.
Thank you.
Well, you can see it's been a popular subject, but I have the privilege of asking you New Mexico's official state question, red or green?
I'm opinionated. If it's an enchilada, it has to be red. It has to be shredded beef. And if it's green, it goes on pizza. And it also goes on a hamburger. So red also goes on breakfast. I could do, but I won't never ever mix red and green. I guess I'm a little, they both have to be different flavors and they should be who they are.
All right, so we know what to put in the bait station for this guy. And then what can this community do for you?
Well, it's amazing. I have, I wish I would have been able to write some stuff down because the constructive criticism is what I really need. I need to hear about how I can get out to the press. I kind of already do that. You've encouraged me enough to say you've got something there. That's a lot. That's something that, after a bit of time, you're beginning to wonder, am I wasting my time? Is this just, is anybody going to listen? And I think just getting that kind of assistance really, or, people patting you on the back enough to go, don't stop, don't quit. I think and maybe a suggestion on this one, we were told we missed out on a $7 million grant because we were incorporated and not a nonprofit. That just about sank my heart. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. We did go through a nonprofit, but they just didn't like that nonprofit. And so now it's like, now what do we do? And we can't create a nonprofit because they got to be very separate. But do we create a separate one, which I think maybe we do? Maybe it's more of a research kind of arm that utilizes a lot of the technology from WPM, or do we partner up with a 501c3 that isn't so political, that sees that this definitely is so, if you got any ideas on that, that's where we're at right now, to find out that we missed out on a $7 million grant because of, I'll call it politics, I think it was. That just about makes me sick. So any kind of suggestions on that would be huge.
Well, thanks again for coming, and go ahead, put your hands together. And I think you've seen again today what this community can do for you. Lots of great suggestions, but most importantly, as you just heard, we're here to give you the encouragement to say you're not crazy. Even if your family and friends are telling you that, we're here to tell you there's a way to push through and there's a way to go forward. So keep up that spirit, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.